started with a party of all things. I never thought a stupid evening filled with bad music and plastic cups of wine would be the thing that would shatter everything. I should have known something was wrong. Looking back, there were signs, but I chose to ignore them. Janet, my wife of 5 years, had been acting different. She was pulling away in small ways. Things that didn't seem like much at first but now hit me like a freight train. The tension started a few months ago. The late nights, the sudden attention to her appearance. More than usual. She was always pretty, but now? She was glowing, constantly adjusting her outfits, taking longer than usual to get ready. I didn't question it, not at first. I figured maybe she was just going through some personal thing, or maybe she wanted to feel good about herself. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Then there was Ian. At first, he was just a name, a face I saw occasionally at parties or events, someone who would laugh too loud or tell jokes that were never funny. Janet always seemed to enjoy his company more than others, and I didn't think anything of it until I started noticing them together more often, laughing a little too close. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. People joke around, right? It was nothing until it wasn't. One Friday night, Janet and I were invited to this house party at some mutual friend's place. She was excited, which was unusual. Normally, she'd go to these things, but I could tell something was different that night. She spent hours getting ready, and I could hear her in the bathroom, applying makeup, changing outfits, asking for my opinion, which was weird because she never used to care about what I thought about her clothes. When we arrived, I immediately noticed Ian. He was all over her, laughing and talking like they were the only two people in the room. But the worst part? The way he looked at me. There was this smugness in his eyes, like he knew something I didn't. And that's when I saw it. Janet in that tight dress, laughing, her hand resting on Ian's arm. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But then, the moment that changed everything happened. I was sitting at the party, nursing a drink, watching as my wife, flirted with Ian. She was dressed in a revealing outfit, her laughter filling the air, and Ian had his hand around her waist. He shot me a mocking look, one I'll never forget. "Hey, loser, your wife's great on the dance floor. Do you think she's just as good in bed?" He sneered, and everyone around them burst into laughter. I froze. I couldn't breathe for a second. It wasn't just the words. It was the casual, almost rehearsed way he said it, like he was daring me to react. Janet, my wife, didn't even flinch. She smiled at me, her lips curling in that way I used to find adorable, but now felt like a slap to the face. "Just a joke, Brian. Don't be mad," she said, throwing in that little smirk I used to think was cute, but now felt like a dagger to my chest. I gritted my teeth, barely holding back. The room felt like it was closing in on me. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my mind couldn't process what was happening. The anger, the betrayal, it was all bubbling up, but I kept it together. But then, it happened. I don't even know why I did it, but I stood up, walked out of the room, and into the backyard to catch my breath. Everything inside me screamed to confront them right there, but something held me back. I didn't want to make a scene. Maybe I was just scared of what I might find out. But I knew something was horribly wrong. I couldn't shake the image of Ian's smirk, or the way Janet's smile had twisted. It didn't feel like a joke anymore. The whole thing, the way they acted so casually, like they didn't have a care in the world, hit me like a ton of bricks. I wanted to confront her then and there, but my mind raced with too many questions. Was this really happening? Was I overreacting? I couldn't trust myself to think clearly in that moment. I spent the rest of the night trying to act normal, but I could barely look at Janet. She'd come up to me every now and then, pretending like everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, until the next morning, when I found the envelope. It was tucked under the pile of bills on the kitchen counter. A plain white envelope, no address, just my name scrawled on the front. My first instinct was to ignore it. Maybe it was just junk mail or something from one of her side projects. But something in my gut told me to open it. I hesitated for a moment before pulling the flap open. Inside was a small, folded piece of paper. My heart skipped a beat as I read the words written in a familiar handwriting. Janet's. It wasn't a letter to me, but to Ian. And as I read through it, my stomach dropped. The words were casual, almost loving, but the context was clear. She had been seeing him behind my back for weeks, maybe months, and not just seeing him but sneaking around. The note didn't hold back. It was full of little details that sent my mind spinning. Can't wait for tonight, Ian. I'll wear that dress you love. Let's make sure Brian doesn't find out this time. You know how to keep him distracted. The room spun as I read those words over and over again. This wasn't just an affair. This was planned. Carefully, meticulously planned. And all this time I had been the fool, oblivious to everything. I was numb. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything, but I didn't know what. I sat there, holding the note in my trembling hands, unsure of how to feel. Betrayed? Devastated? Angry? The words felt like they were cutting deeper than any physical blow could ever do. I stood up and paced back and forth, trying to make sense of it all. I knew I had to confront her. There was no way around it. I couldn't pretend anymore, not after seeing this. But what would I say? How would I even begin? And what was I supposed to do with this knowledge? I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and disbelief. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a one-off. This was her choice. And now I was left with the mess she had created. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, staring at the envelope on the kitchen counter, the weight of the note still hanging over me. I kept thinking about the way Janet had acted earlier, how everything seemed so perfect when we were together, when I thought we were happy. I was fooling myself, wasn't I? How could I have missed all these signs? The next morning, she came down the stairs like nothing had changed. She kissed me on the cheek as she grabbed her coffee, asking about my plans for the day. Felt like a punch to the gut. How could she act so normal after everything? I couldn't take it anymore. I walked up to her, heart pounding, and I slammed the envelope down in front of her. Her eyes widened as she looked at it, and she froze. I could see the panic in her eyes, but she tried to stay calm. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice steady but not convincing. "Doesn't matter," I said, my voice thick with anger. "What matters is that I found it. I know what's going on. I know about you and Ian." Her face went pale, and for a moment, she didn't speak. Then, she shook her head, a desperate smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Brian, please, this isn't what you think. It's not serious. We were just having fun." I couldn't believe my ears. Fun? She called it fun? I could feel the anger rising in me, but I bit my tongue, fighting to keep my composure. "You think this is fun?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. "You think I'm some kind of idiot? You've been sneaking around with him for weeks, and now you want to tell me it's nothing?"
No, Janet.
"This is a betrayal, and you've been lying to my face." Her eyes started to tear up, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not now. Not after everything. "I didn't mean for it to get out of hand," she said, her voice breaking. I thought I could keep it from you. I was going to end it, I swear. I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't want to hurt me?" I repeated, the disbelief flooding my voice. "You're telling me you thought it was okay to keep seeing him behind my back, lying every day? And now, you think a few tears and excuses are going to fix it?" She stepped forward, her hands reaching for mine, but I pulled back. I couldn't stand to touch her. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I trusted, was a stranger. "I'm sorry, Brian. I am sorry," she whispered, but I couldn't bring myself to care about her apology. It didn't change anything. I didn't yell. I didn't even cry. I just stood there, numb, staring at the woman who had promised to love me forever and had broken that promise without a second thought. "I want you out of the house," I said quietly, the words cutting through the air like a knife. "You need to leave. I don't want to see you right now." She tried to argue, but I didn't want to hear it. My heart was shattered, and no amount of words from her could fix it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what to do next. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to live in this lie anymore. If she wasn't going to respect me, then I had to respect myself. And that meant ending this relationship, no matter how much it hurt. The days after Janet left were a blur. The house, which had once felt like home, now felt like a prison. I walked around in a daze, the silence deafening. Every corner of this place held memories. Memories I didn't want to remember, but couldn't escape. I kept thinking about everything I had overlooked, the little things that made sense only now. I couldn't stop thinking about Ian, that smug bastard. How had I let him into our lives? Let him in so easily. It made me sick to think about him. How he'd been pretending to be my friend all this time, while secretly undermining me, taking what was mine. I didn't want revenge. Not at first. I wanted to hurt him, of course. I wanted to confront him, to make him feel the pain I was feeling. But I didn't want to become the type of person who let anger control their life. But then the thought crossed my mind, the thing that made me feel like I could regain some of the control I had lost. I'd been holding on to something for a long time, something I had worked hard for. My career, my success. I wasn't just some guy living in his wife's shadow anymore. And now I had a chance to do something with that. I didn't waste any time. I went back to my job with renewed focus. I buried myself in work. The hurt was still there, deep down, but I realized something. This pain didn't define me. And if I had to burn it all down and build something new, then so be it. Months passed. I focused on my personal growth, pushed my career forward, and slowly, things started to shift. I wasn't the same guy who'd stood there, broken and confused. I was stronger now and it felt good. But there was something else that kept creeping into my mind. I started planning. And not just for myself. I knew I needed to hit Ian where it would hurt. But this wasn't going to be some petty revenge. No, this was going to be something that would change the dynamic completely. I wasn't just going to win. I was going to level the playing field. I didn't have to do anything extreme. It wasn't about humiliation or making anyone suffer. No, it was about making sure I came out on top, more successful, more powerful than ever before. Ian's smug attitude had to go. The way he walked around like he had nothing to worry about, it needed to be shaken up. So I started making moves. I took on projects that put me in a position to grow financially, strategically, and professionally. I invested in myself, in my future. I knew that if I played my cards right, I could come out of this stronger than anyone would expect. Eventually, it paid off. I began to rise in my field, surpassing expectations. The promotions, the opportunities, one by one they came. I wasn't just successful. I was unstoppable. And that's when the phone call came. Ian. He reached out and I knew exactly what it was about. "Brian, I just wanted to talk. About everything," he said, his voice shaky, like he knew he'd lost. I couldn't help but smile, the feeling of satisfaction coursing through me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about moving forward, about claiming what was mine. And now, Ian was realizing the consequences of his actions. "I've moved on, Ian," I said calmly. "You should do the same." And just like that, I knew I had won. Not in some dramatic showdown, but in the quiet, determined way I rebuilt my life. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything, I can't say I'm completely healed. There's still pain, still moments where I question everything. But I've learned something crucial. Life goes on. We can't control the actions of others, but we can control how we react to them. Janet? She tried reaching out a few times. I didn't respond. She was no longer part of my life, and I wasn't interested in dragging the past back into my present. The truth is, I don't even know what's next for me. Maybe I'll find love again someday, or maybe I'll focus on building the life I've always wanted. But one thing I do know, I'll never settle for less than I deserve again. Not in relationships, not in work, not in anything. I guess the point of all this is, if you're going through something similar, don't lose yourself in the pain. You're stronger than you think, and sometimes the hardest battles are the ones that lead to the biggest victories.